right. It's going to take just a second for everyone to come in. Welcome everyone. My name is Brittany Higginbotham. I'm with Communications and Outreach Manager for the Institute for Public Relations. Thank you all for joining us here today for our webinar with Hunter on their new research, Influence in America. I have a few housekeeping rules before I introduce our speakers and before we get started. Today, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available for playback on our website and YouTube channel within 48 hours. Any resources shared will be attached to that recording as well. Please feel free to drop questions or comments in the chat box or Q&A for our Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Today, our speakers will have a panel discussion after a presentation of the findings presented by Hetty Parker De Maria, Chief Insights and Strategy Officer with Hunter. Our panelists, we have Kasha Pandrea, SVP of Entertainment at Hunter, Lisa Horn, SVP Media Strategy at Hunter, Michael Lamp, Chief Social and Digital Officer, and Danetta Allen, Chief Influence Officer. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Hetty to begin the presentation. If you have any questions or tech difficulties, please feel free to message me and we will resolve. And with that, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Brittany, and thank you all for joining us on this webinar. We are diving in because we have a lot prepared for you. What we will be sharing with you today is first, we're going to tell you why we performed the study in the first place. And then we're going to share with you how we did it, what we learned, what the implications of those learnings were. And at that point, we will drop down and talk about how those insights and implications are leading to the different ways we're executing against them in the marketplace. And we'll be doing that within our panel discussion. So with that said, let's dig right into the purpose. So as many of you on this call may already know, Hunter is a marketing communication agency. We are known for earning consumer attention. And the way we do that is we help our clients achieve their business goals by connecting with the consumers that matter the most with them. And by connecting, I mean both literally connecting with them, but also emotionally connecting with them in the most relevant and engaging way so that we can earn their attention. And so since connecting is so critically important to the value proposition that Hunter delivers our clients, we need to do so in the most strong way possible. And that sometimes is harder said than done. We live in a very evolving landscape, and we see so many changes, even from just 5 to 10 years ago. The rise of digitization, the latest statistic I've seen, people are spending, the average American is spending 7 hours of screen time a day and over 5.5 hours on the phone, on their mobile technology every day. Social media is dominating the marketplace. We're seeing that about a third of that screen time on average is done on social media platforms. And people are using those platforms now, many as a primary source of communication and getting information and news. And so think about that and the way social media serves up information. They do it, a lot of them, based off of algorithms. So social media is actually controlling not only what people are seeing, but how they're seeing it. Additionally, as our phone technology, as smartphones proliferate and as our phone technology gets better and better and better, we're seeing this growth of user-generated content. And with that, the rise of what they call citizens journalism, as well as influencer user-generated content. We know with the spread of fake news and misinformation is one of the biggest challenges now in this social digital landscape that we're living in. The streaming service disruption is majorly disrupting film and television distribution models. And with so many choices and options out there now, it's no wonder that our audiences are fragmenting and becoming that much more increasingly challenging to actually find and connect with. And all of this is leading to a decline of traditional advertising. As we're seeing here at Hunter, and most agencies around the world are seeing that their clients are investing a much larger portion of their dollar towards the social and digital world. And now, with the continued acceleration and growth of e-commerce, with the latest statistic I've seen saying that e-commerce will represent fully a quarter of all retail sales by 2027, and that S-commerce is emerging within that, and that will ultimately, by 2027, so in 3 years, represent 2/3 of e-commerce. We're now seeing that social and digital media does not only have to focus on top of the funnel activities, but actually can pull through the entire purchase funnel. So with this massively evolving landscape, it rose the question for us here at Hunter if saying all these changes that are happening in our media landscape is probably also shifting the fundamental ways consumers are influenced across their entire path to purchase. And it is that specific question that we wanted to investigate more. So how did we do it, you ask? We started with exploratory and we moved on through to diagnostic. From an exploratory basis, we began our journey by fielding a simple, open-ended question to one of our major product sectors, beauty and personal care products. And we had done a pre-survey that identified a group of people who have recently purchased a beauty or personal care item that they didn't routinely buy. And we asked them, can you share with us all the influences you encountered in its purchase? What sources and or people guided your choice? Please be as detailed as possible. Now, I will say this, Hunter has many different practice sectors that are important to us. So while we fielded this question to 1,000 beauty and personal care buyers, we realized, why don't we bite off as much as we think we can chew and ask our other product sectors as well, at least many of them. So we also fielded to 1,000 people a question that recently bought a fashion product and or accessory product that they didn't typically buy, the same type of question. We also went about and looked at a food and or beverage item that was recently purchased, a healthcare product. We looked into home decor, technology, as well as travel. And we posed, again, this very simple, open-ended question with the hopes of learning more. And while the question was simple, the responses were anything but. And they really ran the gamut as to what, why, and where they bought the product, the specific factors or product features they considered in their purchase. We heard a lot about the degree of risk or the time it took for them to purchase. And then we heard a lot about the sources, and they very much distinctly called attention to the sources that were driving their awareness of the product and or service, as well as the sources they used to learn more about it. So as an example of the kind of responses we got, you'll see this as the example, where many times it was really a factor of several of these factors that came to light within the responses. For instance, I like to try things I don't normally use sometimes. It's based off of what my needs are: price, ingredients, skin benefits. Sources that guided my purchase are online reviews and internet search. Or this other example, I recently bought Laneige 2-in-1 toner and moisturizer. I typically use toner and moisturizer separately, but I love this brand and it's a new product for me that had great reviews, so I wanted to give it a try. It also seemed like a great summer product as it was lightweight. I saw it while shopping for other items on a Sephora app, and I used reviews from other customers to help me make my decision. So you can see we've got a lot of pieces of all of this information, and category by category, across 7 categories, we read through 7,000 responses, coded, classified them, and then reached out to our research partner, Libran Research and Consulting, and we developed a quantitative questionnaire to help us quantify the magnitude of the influence these different areas exert within the purchase funnel from awareness through to actual purchase. And our areas specifically of inquiry were: what product and service did they buy? What was their motivation for purchase? What was their location of purchase? Where did they specifically purchase the product? What factors or features did they consider in their purchase? The sources driving specifically the awareness of the product or service. And we asked on several levels. First, we asked by channel of communication. And after they selected the channels of communications, there were drill downs into the specific tactics within the channels of communication. And then after we asked awareness, we also said, and once you've become aware of the product, what sources did you use to learn more about it to help you decide what to buy? And there too, we asked about channels of communication as well as the specific tactics within. And then for meta-analysis purposes, we asked them the degree of risk they associated with the purchase, as well as the duration of time it took from awareness to purchase. The specific specifications are much like any quantitative survey. We kept it to 15 minutes online. Respondents were screened so that they met the criteria for inclusion. Any respondent could answer up to 3 different sectors if they met that criteria. And while they had to meet that criteria, the respondents were also balanced to be both geographically and demographically balanced to represent the United States. Total respondents in total were 2,500, but it was a little bit more than 1,000 for each of the 7 product sectors under examination. And it was fielded in late October. And we did continue to research the 7 product sectors that we initially did our exploration against. So what did we learn? Well, we got the results back, and we got an amazing amount of very comprehensive and detailed learnings about every single one of our categories. But the real work came in when we then started comparing across categories, because one of the things we really wanted to understand was what held true across most, if not all, of the categories under examination. And so therefore, we would consider it a universal learning that would probably hold true everywhere. And those universal learnings we're going to share with you today, as well as provide you just an example with one of our categories about how category-specific information can complement the universal learning to provide you a really comprehensive understanding of all the influence factors that are important with any particular product category sector. The 6 universal learnings that really jumped out at us, we're going to take one by one, but they are: top of funnel is king of the hill, surround sound drives consumer engagement, IRL trumps URL, word of mouth wins, social digital supports personal expression, and finally, demographic tendencies can help predict sources of influence. So taking the first universal observation, which is top of funnel is king of hill. There's always that debate whenever you begin any kind of campaign or programming as to what are the most important elements and criteria you're trying to accomplish. Is it generate awareness, or is it drive purchase conversion, or one of many other things? Are you trying to drive loyalty, get competitors to switch, and whatnot? In this study, what became very compelling to us is how important that top of funnel strategy is, for many reasons. But from an influencing standpoint, what we learned was when we asked consumers, now that you've become aware of the product, what have you then used? What sources and channels of communications did you use to influence you to learn more about the product, to buy it? We found that anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on the category, basically said no other source. They got the information they needed when they were generating the sources of information they used to generate the awareness, and ultimately ended up not using an additional source. So with that in mind, knowing that so often and so frequently, wherever they learn about the product, that might be the end of their purchase journey, it really does reinforce the importance of top of funnel. Combining that with another fact that we learned, when we looked at the number one source that drove awareness, and among those looking for more information, what was the number one source that was driving that more information? We see that across every single product sector, whatever source is primarily used to first initially become aware of the product, it's also the source that's typically used to also learn more about it. So while marketers have long understood the importance of top of funnel efforts, this study to us has definitively showed us the waterfall impact of purchase funnel activity and how driving awareness really does help pull people down through the purchase funnel. Now, I want to be really careful here because our second learning sounds contradictory to the first learning, but it isn't. While I said that only one channel of communication is used for anywhere from 20 to 40%, on average, 2 to 5 channels of communication are referenced between awareness and purchase across every single one of our product sectors. And in fact, when you start digging into the details, multiple tactics are used within each communication channel. So this really reinforces for us our number 2 universal learning, which is something inherently we always understood. Surround sound drives consumer engagement. It really reinforces the importance of a multi-channel strategy, showing the synergistic power of the multiple sources play a significant role in driving initial awareness and shaping purchase selection. Our third learning was a surprise for me. And that's because given the statistics I shared with you earlier about how 7 hours are spent online, that 2/3 of that is spent on social media, all of those really goes towards reinforcing the importance of social and digital media in today's landscape. And so my hypothesis going into this work was that social and digital media was going to be the number one source used across every channel for both driving awareness and learning more. And so for me, this was a surprise. In fact, as much of the world that is changing, some things don't change that much. And what we're seeing here is in 5 of the 7 sectors that we looked at, in-store was the number one source used to drive awareness and the number one source used to learn more. So with that in mind, and combining that with another learning from the study, which told us if someone learns about something in store and then learns more about them about the purchase in store, there is a strong correlation to them ultimately purchasing this product in store. And that might seem like a no-brainer, but when you look for whether or not that same relationship holds true for online, it does not. There is no correlation between becoming aware and learning more about something online and actually purchasing it online. No correlation at all. So this all led us to the conclusion that brands investing in IRL experiences as part of their marketing mix will really benefit from incorporating a retail component within the footprint to capitalize on just this behavior. The next learning extends out our source information to look at not only the number one source for awareness and learning more, but also now including what was the number 2 source. And you'll see that there's someone I know is highlighted in this light peach, because what we found was friends and family continue to wield really powerful influences, especially in travel. It's the #1 source, and it's the #2 source in food and beverage, healthcare, and for learning more in technology. And so while word of mouth is such a critical channel of communication, we know that marketers sometimes shy away from it because they think it's a hard lever to pull with regards to communication and marketing plans. But recently, we've become very aware that the Gen Z and younger cohorts really begin to view social media influencers as friends. Knowing that family and friends are wielding this powerful source of influence, knowing that Gen Z and younger Gen Alpha consider social media influencers their friends, they're basically handing marketers the reins and elevating influencer marketing to one of the most powerful levers of influence that's in the market today. So I mentioned that social digital media, I was expecting to be #1 and 2 across the board. What we really found here is that, of course, social digital media has become very, very important. And in fact, it is more important in every single product sector than traditional media, which fell towards the bottom, if not is the bottom in every single category. But it didn't rise to #1 and 2. It was more of a complementary amplification tool in some of the different sectors. But in some of the different sectors, particularly technology, it was the #1 primary source that consumers went to become aware of technology as well as to learn more about it. And interestingly, we found that it became also really relatively important in categories where the benefit from the category becomes a form of personal expression. So fashion, home decor, beauty and personal care all began to rise to the top in terms of social and or digital media becoming an important, almost critical, influential factor within that particular category. So our implications clear: while social and digital support can complement and amplify communication efforts across almost every category, it really proves essential in technology and aesthetic-based product sectors. And then finally, when it comes to universal learning, we see that demographic tendencies can really help predict success of influence. And by that, what we mean is demographic tendencies really come to light within each category itself, but there are a few universal tendencies that do exist. For instance, and this one's not going to be a surprise for anyone, we see that younger cohorts as well as BIPOC households are greatly or more greatly influenced by social media than older and mainstream households. We interestingly learned that men become more aware of products through traditional media than women, and women are more likely to build awareness through social media, word of mouth, or expert advice. Additionally, large households with kids, and BIPOC households tend to view purchase decisions riskier than the average household. And the way that I served that up, I made them sound like they're all discrete. And they are, but if you were to draw a Venn diagram of all three of them, you would see a large part of all three of them do overlap. So importantly, yes, each one of these demographics view almost every purchase decision across every category a little bit riskier, but they do tend to be very similar households. With that said, we also saw a very strong correlation, as one would imagine, between how risky an item is perceived and how many sources you're going to use prior to buying it. So the greater the risk, the greater the number of sources you're going to use. So it is these households that multi-strategy tactic becomes that much more critical for. And then finally, we also learned that influencers are especially influential among Hispanic, and Black consumers. If they are your consumer target, you want to make sure that you include influencer marketing within your campaign. So understanding these tendencies ensures essential communication channels are aligned to your specific consumer audiences. Now, I do keep mentioning category specific, and it's really important that you also overlay upon this learning the specifics of a particular category to fully and comprehensively understand what key influences are. For instance, what we looked at was the level of perceived risk as well as the number of sources. The x-axis is the perceived level of risk on average within each product sector, and then on average, the number of sources. And you can see here, there was a pretty straight line correlation. And you see where travel lands. It's all the way up in that right-hand corner, which is perceived as the most risky of our monitored product sectors, and therefore also uses the largest number of sources to learn more before booking a travel. With that in mind, we recognize that while a multi-channel strategy is important overall, it is critically important if you work in the travel industry. So what sources do you tap into to develop this program? And that's where the devil's in the details, and all of that learning is within each one of our category-specific information, where we learn what are those key channels of communication that became aware and purchased, as well as the tactics within it, and what are the key tactics that need to be employed. So what we've to take away from this with regards to travel is, if we really want to pare this down to the specific primary sources of travel influence, it's family, friends, search activity, travel brand websites and or apps, and online reviews. But there's other learning that we get from this as well. Not only what are the key influences, but what aren't the key influences. For instance, traditional media, as we had mentioned before, is falling to the bottom of the list. We also see that travel agent and service, which was once the only way you can book travel, has now also fallen to the bottom of the pile. Our category-specific information also helps round out providing us all the other information that influences a purchase. For instance, where the product is actually, or service in this case, is actually booked. And here it's not surprising, as seeing that travel agents and services did fall to the bottom. We see in terms of where it's actually booked, it's also fallen. It only represents 10% of the travel business. Where so much more is really more now booked through DIY, whether it be a hotel website, an airline website, a discount travel site. Additionally, we went on to learn what those primary features are considered, with the top of the hierarchy being price, followed by time of year and previous experience with travel location. And then we even learned what are the top motivators for, in this case, travel, with relaxation and de-stressing being by far, among almost 2/3 of travelers, being one of the primary reasons they took the trip. All of this type of information will help you develop a really comprehensive understanding of the factors of influence, allowing you to develop compelling and engaging messages and programs, as well as critical points of connection. In the travel industry, we get to be even more specific against the demographic tendencies, which will allow you to more effectively target and program against what you're trying to do within your campaign. For instance, as we had seen universally, women do rely more on word of mouth and social media when planning a trip, and men not only respond more to traditional media, but also digital media. We learned that Black and Hispanic consumers are more likely to travel for relaxation. Hispanic and white consumers are more likely to consider previous experience with a destination, and Asian consumers are most concerned about price. We also learned that households with kids more often gain awareness through social media and then use digital media for research. And as such, they're much more likely to book their trip online, and they do view that as a much greater risk. And then finally, we see younger travelers are more often seeking adventure and cultural immersion as opposed to relaxation and de-stressing. And we see millennials are the ones that are most likely to use these discount booking sites. So with all of that said, the universal learnings, the category specific learnings, what specifically did we take away from this? We get it. The evolving media landscape is altering fundamentally how consumers are influenced. And there are universal shifts that we reviewed that provide a foundational understanding on some essential elements of influence. But the devil is absolutely in the details, and category level influences are absolutely critical for a comprehensive understanding on how to best motivate consumers. And with that, we want to now talk about our panel. But first, I'd like to give you a little bit more thorough introduction of our panelists. I have the pleasure of working with these people every day. I'm always amazed by their expertise, and I'm just honored to be able to do so. And I want to give them a quick chance to introduce themselves before we jump into the questions, so that you can see how so much of what I shared with you today comes to life in the marketplace. Danetta, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Donna Allen. I'm the Chief Influencer Officer here at Hunter, and I've had the privilege of working with many of my colleagues for many years. But, one of the kind of shining moments of my career has been able to build out our influencer practice and really establish our best practices. It's built on the foundation that PR has always been the cornerstone and kind of the foundational practice that manages influential relationships, right? Started back in the day with really leading out on building relationships with reporters that help to kind of manage that outward perception. And as our communications landscape has evolved, we've taken those cornerstone foundational pieces of our practice and applied those into the digital landscape. So that's kind of my role. And I've worked on influencer campaigns from Transformers and working with fanboys to really building out influencer programs for Amazon, and kind of work with the team across the board here at the agency to build out programs. So I'm going to pass the torch over to Kasha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kasha Pandira, and I'm an SVP on the entertainment team here at Hunter. I'm a bit of a newer member to the Hunter team as I've started this year, and I sit in the Los Angeles office. I have over 18 years of experience in the talent and celebrity procurement space, having focused on strategic planning tactics across 360 programming needs for various agencies and brands and across the largest global advertisers in the world. And I'm just thrilled to be on this panel and to speak to you a little bit about celebrity and expert talent. And I will toss it over to my colleague, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Horn. I lead the earned media team here at Hunter. I've been in PR for 16 years now. 10 of those have been at Hunter, and I've worked across a variety of some of the world's largest consumer products and brands. Now my focus is on growing the creative and strategic thinking for our agency's earned media efforts across all clients. So similar to Danetta and Kasha, I get the pleasure of working with all of our teams and clients at Hunter. And basically, when our teams want to land those big media placements, our team comes in and helps deliver that. And now to Michael.
Awesome. I'm going to bring us home. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Lamp, fondly or not so fondly, depending on who you are, referred to as Lamp usually, as an inanimate object last name. It's hard to avoid. I have the great fortune of being the Chief Digital Officer at Hunter, working with this wonderful group of colleagues. Danette and I are sort of opposite sides of the same coin. We sort of built this digital practice together over the last 10 plus years. I've been at Hunter for 16 years. And similar to my colleagues, we have the luxury of working cross-functionally. So we get to kind of dip in and out of all the business units so we understand the category specific nuances. But moreover, we're tasked with how do you cut through those variables, if you will, to determine the right strategy for a brand, right? And so I think in some situ coming up, we'll talk about the results of the study and how we as practitioners use it to inform the counsel we give to clients. So happy to be with you today and bring on the questions.
Great. So you can see why I am in awe of working with these people every day. Starting off our questions, Lisa, we're going to start with you.
Sure.
We saw in the presentation that traditional media has fallen to the bottom as a recognized source of influence across almost every one of the measured channels, both in how products and services generate awareness and where people go to learn more about them. What specifically does that mean for media outreach? Have you seen this particular channel of communication or tactic within the channel of communication evolve over time? Is it still influential? And if so, how?
Yes, no, all great questions. I think what we're seeing, today is that it certainly has evolved, but today all media is now primarily digital. So whether that's through their .com presence or their social media channels, media outlets do continue to serve as trusted sources of information for both and influence for consumers. But we are seeing that the way that people consume their news has drastically changed. And that's especially for the younger generations. They're really curating their own news. And this is through the platforms which they are visiting and reading, what outlets and creators they're following. But this still includes a mix of what we would call, both traditional and emerging platforms. So as consumers turn to, social media and podcasts to get their news, what we're doing is building relationships with social media reporters at those top tier outlets to make sure that we're speaking with them about our clients. We're adding podcasts to our media strategies, especially for executive interviews as it relates to thought leadership and reputation management. And we're keeping an eye on emerging channels. So Substacks, that's sort of a buzzword in the halls of Hunter these days. They're continuing to grow in popularity, and we're monitoring and determining the best way to work with these growing channels. But really, we're on the cusp to see what happens there. So yes, the media landscape is certainly evolving, but getting that coveted third-party endorsement from a top-tier outlet that already has that built-in following is still super valuable to our clients and therefore to consumers as well.
Thank you. So to your point, a lot of what was traditional media has migrated over to the digital channels. So this next question, I'd like to target you, Michael. Digital and social media has become a much more important source of influence, but it can be really confusing. Sometimes it's a primary source, sometimes it's a complementary source. And then demographically, we're seeing that sometimes it's incredibly influential and sometimes lesser so. Can you share with us, are you finding this to be true for your clients? And then how do you help them develop a social digital strategy that helps them reach their specific targets in a way that will help them achieve their business objectives?
Sure. Excuse me. So I'm going to unpack that question in a couple places. I think Lisa set it up perfectly. It was a nice thank you for the baton, Lisa, esteemed colleague, because the reality is that while traditional media might, suffer in terms of rankings, the reality is that traditional media, as people that we pitch or as people in charge of reaching the masses, we just reach them differently, right? We often reach them on places like social. I wish I had a Substack. I would ask you to subscribe to it. Danetta. But the breakdown you talked about, it's funny, I know you said you were a little surprised to see the sort of the role that social plays. I think you expected it to be the top driver right across the board, and it wasn't so much. I think for Danette and I, living in these categories and with this data all the day, all the time, it's maybe a little less surprising. But for me, when we think about the difference in channels and the difference in just social as an agnostic, are you going to social media to get to raise awareness or to convert to a purchase? To me, what we're leaving out there is a really big piece of the magic of strategy, which is the channel plan, right? It all comes down to the sort of the health of the particular channel to satisfy that industry, that category, the influencers that dominate it, et cetera, right? So when we think about something like food or beverage, where I think digital maybe has less of a stronghold, but certainly is still influencing and driving engagement. Conversely, tech doesn't surprise me that it was the lead player on both sides. Technology is the place for the unbox, the how-to, the review, right? The understand this hardware and this software. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But I would just take it one step further. And you talked about the nuance between expression and maybe sort of social as a means of expression, social as a means of of breaking down difficult topics? And then when is it more relegated, let's say, to just amplification? And I think we can look at channels as a way to find our answers there, right? You look at TikTok, you look at Instagram, this is more of an expression era social, if you will, right? So naturally, those more aesthetically minded categories, whether it be fashion or beauty, personal care, are going to find a home there. But moreover, people as users of social on those channels do it to be sort of more expressive, right? That's why stickers or GIFs or GIFs, however you want to pronounce it, right? These are really content creation devices. When you think about tech right now, the smartphone is yes, we receive media, but we also create a lot there versus these new media gadgets like Rabbit, right? An AI tool that's just about responsiveness and being more directive. These are ways that people, I think, are using tech differently, and we're seeing that play out in the survey. I would just make an additional note. You look at somewhere like YouTube, and I think it proves out the second point of what the study was telling us. That's where, you know, you can follow folks like one of my personal favorites, _magnify, if you're not following on Shorts. He basically breaks down tough history subjects in 30 seconds. So again, it fits to your distilling difficulty. And then lastly, the X's, formerly known as Twitters, the Reddits of the world. This is where people are aggregating content largely, right? And unfortunately, that's where misinformation, disinformation, bad actors dwell, but also legitimate journalists, folks who Lisa are trying to pitch, right? It's where like Muckrack and tools like that come into play. So I would always encourage, and this is really what we do with clients, right? When we get into social boot camps, the big question is, how are we going to come out of this session with a plan on social that is essentially a channel plan buoyed by different content, right? So we're trying to unpack these questions and then build the answer that is ultimately the brand's playbook and how they're going to reach people differently than XYZ competitor. So hopefully that helps thinking about the data, but also how we'd use the data to program for a client.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. Thank you, Michael. And as you're building that plan, as we think about that, this next question goes to you, Danetta. One of the kind of most powerful insights possibly coming from our study is that while we recognize friends and family continue to wield a powerful influence, especially in those sectors, I think it was travel, food and beverage, healthcare, and technology, the fact that we're also hearing that younger cohorts view social media influencers as friends, giving us the reins and elevating influencer marketing to one of the most powerful levers of influence. That seems like such a powerful insight. Are you seeing this to be true? And I'm going to give you a lot of questions like I've been giving everyone. And if you are seeing this as true, are you able to tap into influencers and elevate them to friend status? And if so, how are you doing that so that it is believable and authentic for the brand you're representing?
That's a lot
The
in a
question.
question, Hetty. But I want to break it down a little bit here and kind of go back to what makes us feel close to people, right? And when we're talking about feeling close to someone and establishing a rapport, it is in making ourselves vulnerable and in sharing, right? So sharing what we're doing in our day-to-day, sharing those things that we're vulnerable, that we're kind of questioning about ourselves, sharing things that we're excited about. And that essentially is what an influencer does, is they have broken down this wall. They're sharing about their life, they're being vulnerable, and they're giving people a glimpse into their daily lives. Most influencers started with 2 followers, right? And through their vulnerability and their persuasiveness in telling a story, they've gained a following. And as they've gained followers, they've essentially gained friends. And what's interesting when you talk to influencers, they oftentimes will break down how they interact with their followers. And a lot of that is through the direct messages features on the different platforms. So they are having these conversations in a very friend-like way with their followers. And that kind of behavior builds trust. And so what happens is you have all of these followers, and some people have 500, some have 500,000, some have 5 or 10 million followers, where they've built this trust with their followers, and now they do consider themselves to be friends. And so when that happens, and you have a friend who you trust, and they try a new lipstick, or they go to this beautiful location, or they discover a new book that they have loved to read and they talk about it. You trust them because you know them, because you've had this relationship that you've built with them by viewing their content or engaging with them over and over. You know, like my friend Andrew in Kansas City, who's a lawyer, never met him, but he's now my friend on TikTok, right? We kind of have this experience of if Andrew's telling me a story about his neighbor who hid rocks or whatever the case may be, I think it's hilarious and I'm going to tell someone about it because we have that relationship. So when we're talking about how, you know, brands or how companies can tap into this powerful relationship that influencers have with their followers, it's by identifying those really tight connections that an influencer might already have with the brand. What are those behaviors that are like that they already participate in, right? Are they already shopping for makeup? Are they already doing fashion try-ons? Are they already reading books? What are the behaviors that are very natural to their day-to-day content creation and to what they're sharing? And then finding really innovative ways to naturally weave our story into those narratives and into that type of discussion. And that's where the power of influence is. It's not in picking random people to talk about something that's not a natural fit. It's finding the natural fit that adds additional power to your brand and to your narrative. And that's what makes a difference. And that's why brands who are really harnessing influencer marketing in a way that helps to progress the narratives are working with influencers who are really natural fit, who have this friend-like relationship with their followers. And that's where we really see this making a big impact. And where, you know, in the case of the data, obviously we're seeing that word of mouth and that friends and family. And it might be an influencer that you consider to be a friend, right? It might be someone you go to lunch with, and it might be someone who's like, well, my friend Andrew told me this because I talk to him every day on social, right? So there's a lot of power in a really conscientious influencer.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. And in thinking about the importance of that connection, I'm going to segue that to a question for you, Kasha, because one of the learnings in our study is as we look to see the level of influence expert talent has versus celebrity talent in almost every single product sector, both influence in generating awareness as well as influence in learning more, they're almost equally as influential. So can you share with us, how do you decide which one is right for your client? And how do you find the ones that best connect with your audience?
I love these questions. And this is perfect because I think, Danetta, you hit the nail on the head here. Across the board, whether it's for expert talent or traditional celebrity and even influencer, identifying the right partner is a bit of an art and science. You know, the art is that connection. It's human nature, it's emotion. It's taking a step back outside that data to uncover how we define what connectivity means to our clients in association to their brands. You know, we need to ask those questions. What excites our consumers? How can we drive that messaging in an impactful way? What are we trying to say? And how can we best communicate what is needed? Sometimes, you know, we think about, you know, expert versus celebrity. Is it more credible to have an expert speak to the messaging because of their backgrounds or their education or their particular expertise? I like to think of this in particular for maybe healthcare or perhaps even decor when we're looking at those sectors. Or conversely, on the celebrity side, are we looking to provide connectivity through celebrities that can speak to our messaging in that authentic capacity, as Danetta mentioned, you know, providing consumers a glimpse into their lifestyles, allowing them to feel that intimacy with the talent through, you know, brand connections can truly be an impactful way to drive trusted purchasing decisions. Now, that's the art of it, but without, you know, the science to drive that, you know, the data is intrinsically tied to how we identify strategy and talent approach. It's with research like this and these insights, you know, as we've heard today, that inform and truly help to meet client objectives. So again, we like to ask more questions. It's very inquisitive. And that's truly to hone in on the best criteria for identification. So who is our core demographic in this space? What are they predominantly purchasing? and where are they purchasing these products and retaining this information. Our overall arching goals have to tie into this as well. It's very nuanced. So whether it's from a media standpoint with Lisa or on a digital footprint with Michael and the like, ultimately it's important to understand so that we can build out talent criteria to identify the authenticity we are looking for when we partner. All these details are puzzle pieces we put together to ensure a cohesive approach. As we know, there are various puzzle pieces, and they look like they may fit, but sometimes it can be challenging to identify which pieces are critical and where those pieces should go. So when we're looking to identify experts and celebrities or even influencers, we're also looking at the big picture. I love this phrase, the forest between the trees, so to speak. And this really is to ensure that we are setting our clients and brands up with the approach and talent that puts the pieces of the puzzle together in an informed, the science and the data, and an impactful way, the art of it.
Thank you. And I'm going to borrow that, put the pieces of the puzzle as my segue into my next question. And this one, I'm going to just open up to the entire panel, because what was really interesting to me, and again, probably a little more surprising for me than maybe some of you, was that despite the growing importance of social digital influences, in-store still packed a powerful punch when it comes to influence. So have any of you been finding that your clients are incorporating a retail component to their marketing plans to capitalize on this behavior? And because I can't just ask one question without asking three, are there other in real life experiences that you also believe to be influential? And if so, what are they and how have you employed them with your clients?
I can step in here because this is actually something that, from an influencer perspective, we look at quite a bit. So oftentimes, if we are working with a brand where an item might not be in an expected place in a grocery store, for example, an influencer going and doing like a shop along experience is very impactful. It drives a really strong message and it helps their followers discover where to look for a new product, right? So that can be a helpful in-store moment. Another time and place where we found this to be really helpful is in some of these kind of high-level decision-making things that might impact your home decor, paint color decisions, like high-impact purchases that are not just a one-time, like I'm choosing a new ice cream flavor, but something that's going to have a long-term impact. And like that in-store experience is oftentimes intimidating for someone if you're doing a high price point purchase or a high impact decision. So kind of bringing followers along and walking them through the experience of choosing paint color or working with a specialist in the store, or kind of giving them that hands-on experience kind of vicariously through social content has a big impact and helps them understand what they'll be asked from a kind of from a perspective of if they go and kind of follow the same pattern. So that in-store experience can really come to life really well in social media. We do a lot of shop alongs, a lot of like, come with me, come follow me, let's do a try on, right? Kind of showing up with influencers in stores is a really impactful way to kind of drive that in-store experience without actually having their followers in the store at the same time. Another thing that I think is really interesting from this perspective is with so many, direct-to-consumer brands doing really well, kind of from a shopper experience perspective, doing a pop-up, like kind of showing up and giving people an experience to do some hands-on, try-ons, touch and feel the products before they purchase it is a really strong way to kind of bring that experience to consumers and to have influencers kind of help tell that story.
Yeah, and just building on that from a media perspective, we find a similar, experience with media. They want to be able to touch and feel our products. So IRL events, pop-ups, experience, give media a really great opportunity to interact with our brands, but also interact with our spokespeople. So just kind of tying it back to some of the other things we were just talking about, that could be, it's, us setting up a media event where we're demoing one of our skincare products like Neostrata and setting media up to speak to our accredited dermatologists more about skincare. Or it could even look like, creating fun experiences for media, like something we just did recently with Airwick. We did this flower arranging class, and we had Egypt Sharad from HGTV host it. So in-person events and sort of IRL experience are also really important for media as well, from my perspective.
Thank you. You know what's becoming very apparent to me as I'm hearing all of you talk, that while the study treated each channel of communication and tactic within it as discrete and siloed opportunities, the more and more I'm hearing from all of you, the more I'm realizing just, again, Kasha, your example of puzzle pieces, it truly, there's quite a bit of overlap or synergies that happen. And one of the big learnings from the study was that a multi-channel strategy is always the best way to go, and that it's really that surround sound that's most impactful. So with that in mind, again, open to the entire panel, it's my last prepared question for you all. But I want to know, are you finding that your plans that you're personally working on spanning multiple channels of communication, and are you finding you're working together now more so through that lens to develop programs for your clients?
Yeah, I'll jump right in there because I was sort of like ready to go jump in as Danetta was talking, because I think the conversation, I want to kind of go back to the previous question, right? Very clear that one of our findings is like IRL, IRL, IRL. And I think that's a big aha moment for people, right? And I also think there's some psychographics in the return from the pandemic and all what that means. But I would just remind everyone that retail is not exclusively in store, right? And so I think it's super important for us to think about multi-channel as also, obviously, we're always in pursuit of the purchase journey and driving conversions, but perhaps with certain categories in particular, and I noticed a good question from Joel, I think it was, about the variance in the food and beverage category, which I think is valuable as it relates to this, right? Because it might take a few additional sort of hits, if you will, to get someone to convert to a high-priced liquor bottle versus, I think, the example of like baking soda, right? So that's where a multi-channel approach where you've got influencers in the mix doing the sort of go along with me, where they're enjoying some of these maybe higher priced beverages, with then potentially even partners like we've used Micmac or these shoppable social solutions in the past that turn a social post into a clickable shopping experience. So here's the thing, you might not convert there, but you might get really great basket data or shopper data that then you can share with the other side of the house. And then suddenly I'm sitting at a table with all these colleagues, and Danetta's talking about what she's doing in the IRL space. And I'm thinking, okay, what can we do first to hit them with an exposure online and then retarget them with the influencer content, right? So I do think that variance of buying a let's say like a remote control car versus a Lexus that you're going to drive, it's a very different thing. And ultimately, you're not going to convert on a Lexus until you get in store and drive the thing, but you might on a remote control car. And so it's understanding the difference and then casting the multi-channel and, not for nothing, tactics within it, right? Organic social versus paid social to hit those channels.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely agree with that. I love what you said about the Lexus and the bells and whistles and experiencing that. And I kind of translate that to when we are trying to identify talent and how programming tactics come to life. We want those bells and whistles as a part of it to really be the most impactful programming tactics to really hit those objectives, right? So I am talking to everyone here, especially Lisa on a regular basis, Michael and Danetta. All of these insights tie together. We ask a lot of questions for a reason, because we do need to pull that into one singular, again, full picture puzzle. Each of these pieces are so important. So I like what you said. And yes, to answer your question, Danetta, we do speak to each other regularly, all the time, every day, all day. It's an information share. We have to do it that way. It only benefits how we approach it, and it only benefits our clients and the brands that we work so hard for.
Well, it looks like we're out of time. We were going to open it up to Q&A at this point, but Brittany, it looks like we're out of time. So, what do you propose? You're on mute.
There we go. Okay, I propose, if it is okay with you all, if they have any questions, they could email or message on LinkedIn for any additional questions or thoughts about the white paper.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank
Okay.
you, everyone, for your time. Thank you, panelists, for joining me today.
Thanks,
You,
everyone.
Patty. Have
Thank
a good
you.
one, everybody. Thanks.
Take care.
You.
Bye.